fun to talk about these areas every year.
In time, I think people will actually forgive Mitch Pearce for Origin. I mean, not as a rugby league player, just as a victim. You know, I actually met Paul Mellor once. I didn't care for him. Made me see things Eddinghausen's way. Actually, it's quite a sad thing. People often tend to forget about poor old Craig Gower, but not if you've played golf with him. Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of The Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast that hasn't thrown Mitchell Pearce a lifeline. Today on the show, we'll be discussing all things pressing in the world of rugby league, including Mitchell Pearce, who has had his very frail chicken wings clipped, and Samoa's journey of progressing to the finals without the need to win a single match. But first, as always, I am joined on the panel by Chip Jones.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I can hardly articulate my joy.
Well, you've certainly done a good job of doing it just then.
I appreciate that.
Chip, how have you seen the World Cup?
Very impressed with Australia so far. They haven't really dropped anything. They've had some tougher games than maybe they expected. England was an interesting one, as we spoke about last week.
Indeed.
I really enjoyed watching New Zealand lose. I thought that was fantastic.
Well, you've watched a fair bit of that this World Cup, because I think they've only won one game against a minnow. I'm pretty sure they managed to beat Antarctica.
Now, you mentioned Samoa going through without winning a game. How does that make you feel?
Well, it does make a bit of a farce of the competition, Chip, and for any listeners that aren't aware, Samoa managed to progress to the quarterfinals without winning a single match. They got thumped in the quarterfinals by about 50 points, and ironically, they've progressed to the semis.
Should you have a system where if you lose by a certain amount of points, right, that you actually go negative on the score?
Well, I think so. I think if you lose by that many points, you probably should be horsewhipped.
Okay, so what we could do is we could arm a few of the front row of the stadium, that is.
Yeah.
We're not going to arm their front row. They're clearly,
Well, they're big men,
Yeah.
but they probably wouldn't catch you.
No. But we set them loose, and maybe we award the winning team an extra point for winning over 50. So there we could tie in the kind of point system and some kind of brutal retribution that I know you're particularly fond of.
Should a team get bonus points for beating Samoa by 50? I mean, we should make teams have to earn that bonus point. Everyone's done that so far.
Maybe what we could do, right, is we could have a kind of a tournament that's put in place for the right to play Australia. So we could just have Australia in the final.
Yeah.
Okay. They're reigning.
We just go straight through.
How many have they won in a like of all of them?
Oh, all of them bar one.
Bar one. Okay. So how many have we had? Would you have had? You've had 50 years.
You're testing me, mate. Probably, I don't know. It's been going back since the 50s, I think.
Okay. So let's say 50 years, and we generously we're about 20.
We're dominating. Yeah. That's all we need to know.
So we've won 49 out of 50. I think it's fair enough. You just say, well, look, we'll play in the final.
You know what? I think this system makes a lot of sense. You almost make it sound like it's sort of like Australia in this system is like the big boss. Like we're M. Bison in Street Fighter, and everyone else has to kind of qualify to get to us.
Yeah, that's right. So you could have like the Kiwis could be Sagat. Say they're always going to be around.
What did you call them?
Sagat.
Oh, yep.
You know, the second guy before M. Bison.
The guy from Thailand.
You don't know the
guy from
Street
Thailand.
Fighter too. You know that.
I know that.
So, you've barrel-rogged your way through and you've chunked some Lee and you've fucking boxed some fuckers. And, Ryu, were you Ken? I can't remember.
I was always E. Honda.
You were E. Honda. So, Aimon, the world of rugby league this week in the back papers around the country. What caught your eye?
Well, Chip, I think everyone following rugby league is aware that Mitchell Pearce has decided in the last 4 or 5 days to leave the Roosters. I think he's been with the club for 11 years.
Yep.
In the wake of Cooper Cronk coming to the Roosters. It's one of those decisions that I think a lot of people saw coming. I think the Roosters gave Mitchell Pearce 24 hours to decide in what fashion he'd like to leave the club.
Well, I don't
whether
know
it was
the
an
ins
Uber
and
or a
outs
bus
too much, but I did read an article in the Telegraph that mentioned something about a phone call with Nick Politis.
He said to Nick, "Look, I want to play number 7. That's my decision." And Nick said, "Well, goodbye."
Okay.
That's how it happened, apparently.
Was there a better outcome? Is that the best possible outcome? How do you feel about the fallout?
Yeah, I think Mitchell Pearce probably would have benefited from just playing well for the last 10 years. That certainly would have put him in a better position.
Do you think you're harsher on him because he was a Rooster?
I think I'm harsh on him because I'm a New South Wales Blues fan.
Let's have a discussion here about this. I'm going to go on record. This is Chip Jones, ladies and gentlemen. And I am going to back Mitchell Pearce, Player of the Year 2018, wherever he goes.
What, regardless of the club?
But possibly he will only get that good because of what's happened.
How do you think he's going to make that transition, though, Chip? Because he hasn't shown a lot of that ability so far. Is he going to have maybe one of those brain transplants?
Maybe what we could do is put it out to our listeners. Who would like to donate to help?
Well, that is a good call. If anyone is following our Twitter feeds at The Voluntary Tackle, please send in your suggestions as to what Mitchell Pearce should do now that he's left the Roosters. Should he go to another club or should he become a Zumba instructor? It's completely up to you.
Well, I feel I've extricated myself at least somewhat by being impartial.
Well, I think Mitchell Pearce, Chip, should be pretty happy with the situation. I mean, from what I understand, reading the paper today, he's got about 5 or 6 clubs lining up to sack him. Now, the other thing, Chip, about the Mitchell Pearce saga is, I'm not sure if anyone has been out there reading this, but in the wake of him leaving the Roosters, there's quite a few Queenslanders who have sort of sunk the boot in on the way out. Now, one of those people is Wayne Bennett, who got questioned of whether or not he would be interested in Mitchell Pearce coming to the Broncos, of which he said 2 things. He said, well, A, we can't afford him, but B, and more importantly, we don't want him. That's got to hurt, doesn't it?
Well, not if it's the truth. I think Wayne's pretty clear-cut about a lot of things. You could read into that statement as much as you wanted to.
I think he's being serious. He thinks he's shit.
I think he's being serious, but maybe Mitchell doesn't fit their dynamic. I wouldn't suggest Mitchell Pearce go to Brisbane. That's a horrible fit. I don't think that would work. I think he might be amazing for Manly. If he goes there, personally, I'd like to see him go to Newcastle now.
Well, Newcastle would be the perfect fit for him.
Yeah.
Because, half the Roosters are there already.
Well, that's true.
But they need
Joey
a halfback.
Johns' hometown. You know, so it's good to halfbacks.
Yep, that's true. It has been. Although it wasn't particularly fond to Jared Mullen.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the whole issue of sledging Pearce, Chip, do you think Mitchell Pearce gets sledged when he's just in his average, when he's going shopping, for example? Do you reckon he has people following him around sledging him then? He does seem to be a bit of a victim of a good sledge.
Well, I have met Mitchell Pearce, and he only once, but he was pretty quiet, actually. He didn't really say much. I don't know whether...
You sure you're not thinking about him on the field?
Well, no one was sledging him at the time. If in Queensland, then maybe different story.
So what you're saying is if he's out in a normal situation, you don't see sort of regular folk coming up and just sort of spear tackling him?
I haven't seen that personally.
Like if Mitchell Pearce went to the movies, let's say, and the person said to him, it's going to be $20 for that movie ticket, and he only had a 50, and he wasn't sure what change he was supposed to get, would he crumble under the pressure of buying that ticket? I mean, does he crumble in everyday life is what I'm asking.
Well, I don't know. Who do we know that kind of knows him?
Well, we can speculate.
We can.
Facts have nothing to do with our show.
Well,
let's face it.
That's a fact.
That is a fact.
That's
the only fact. Welcome back to the Voluntary Tackle, and we're talking Rugby League World Cup, Chip, and some very interesting events took place in the last round. I'm not sure if anyone was aware of what happened or not, but it turned out Jared Hayne tried to win. I'm not sure. Did you see that part?
I didn't see it, but I heard about it. And
it was shocking.
It could be that Jared Hayne knows no club's going to take him. No one cares. No one's listening to you. All he's got left to do now is play some football.
So you think this is all part of Jared's plan?
Well, it's too late now to do anything else. He's got to stick with it.
Do you think he's going to try to play for another club next year? Will anyone take him?
Maybe he should start his own club. Maybe they should call it the fucking Arab Planes or some like Jared Hayne plane.
The Jared Haynes.
But he's Jared Hayne.
I think he'd like that name though.
Yeah, but you could say Jeff Hayne. This guy's called John Hayne. But there's only one Jared Hayne, he could be the one.
Can I just say this? The word Jeff Hayne is an awful name. It's fucked.
A shame.
Imagine being Jeff Hayne.
It's a shame.
Jared Hayne's not bad.
What about Wayne Hayne?
Wayne Hayne. The thing that I started thinking about when I watched the World Cup and I saw Jared Hayne playing for the first time was the poor old Gold Coast Titans fans who have watched Jared Hayne turn up and just sort of take money every fortnight, but not turn up on the field. They've got to be feeling pretty angry, aren't they?
I would be spewing. So, like I am mad as a Gold Coast Titans fan, sure. I'm not feeling good, but there's a lot I can learn from that. Like it's like that awesome girl at the pub who's by herself and she's having a drink and she's like upset about something.
Didn't Jared Hayne sleep with her?
This can't be right. Well, potentially. And you go over there and then, 35 years later, you're like divorced and you've got no money and everything's fucked and you think, how did this happen to me?
Well, you're getting very deeply philosophical there, Chip, and I like it. But I guess what I'm wondering is, with the Gold Coast Titans fans, are they within their rights, knowing that Jared Hayne has played so well in this World Cup, to just simply set fire to his house?
Be a start. Well, it'd be good to see how he played a game of footy. After being told that
would he show urgency for a change if he had to save his own possessions from a fire?
Particularly, if you're from the club and you're the coach, for example, and you say, look, Jared, I really want you to win this game for me today. And so I've just set fire to your house. And what I've done, right, is I've put what I think are your most prized possessions, your cuddly doll, your first diaper, whatever it is.
Your sex toys, your numerous mistresses.
Yeah, sure. That particular edition that you can't find online. And
certainly not your premiership.
Whatever.
You'll never have one of those.
And you say, but look, if you can have this game wrapped up pretty quick, like let's say in 50 minutes from now, I'll let you go. I'll sub you off and you can go and grab your
You can go and just try to put out the fire.
Yeah, grab your stuff.
So you wouldn't put it out for him. He'd still have to put it out.
Well, that's urgency. You got to like focus this guy, right? You got to inspire him to do what you want him to do, which is win the game of football.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to make winning the game important to him somehow.
Literally put some lives on the line.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we could exert some pressure financially or something. We could lock up his assets or something and say, look, if you win, you can withdraw.
Well, since we're going down that road, Chip, I mean, why not even make it harder? Should you not ask him to put out the fire and tie his hands together? Since we're training him.
Like a Houdini thing. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay.
Should he be handcuffed inside a sort of big chest?
Yeah, like some safe hanging from a crane.
Well, I can tell you this, in terms of who's the bigger magician, Jared Hayne managed to get the Gold Coast Titans to pay them $1 million for not doing a fucking thing. Welcome back to the Voluntary Tackle, and now we're talking about Brad Fittler and his prospects of coaching the New South Wales Blues. Chip, over the course of the Rugby League World Cup, Brad Fittler's copped a lot of raps for coaching Lebanon, a team that's never won a game before, to making the quarterfinals and putting a very good showing for themselves. Do you think that's done his chances some good in terms of being the Blues coach?
I think the smartest thing he did was to get a translator. They can, because he's clearly very difficult to understand. I mean, if we cross,
he's not audible, is he?
He's not really on topic, or he doesn't seem to be on point, or he's really undecipherable. What are you trying to tell me? But with a good interpreter, you can actually get some of that magic. So
did Brad Fittler have that interpreter for the World Cup? Is that why Lebanon went so well?
He speaks every language. He's one of these guys, he speaks like every language that's ever been. Like he can speak to you in languages that even archaeologists can't.
Like
didn't even know existed.
People from Newcastle speak.
He's got a babble fish in his ear. I don't know whether he bought one on eBay.
No.
And basically translates everything. So he's...
that sounds like a fraudulent product.
Well, this one works.
Okay.
And he's using it, and Freddie's had wonders.
Now, Brad Fittler, I think he has done his credentials a lot of good, Chip. But apparently the race is down to two people. It's between Brad Fittler and Michael Maguire for the New South Wales coach.
Well, I don't know Michael Maguire, really. I mean, the name Michael Maguire... It's
very generic.
Could it be a politician? Could you be...
I'm just going to play devil's advocate and actually support Michael Maguire. His claim is that he has every chance of destroying the Maroons because he's already destroyed Greg Inglis's career. So he's sort of done it already.
Yeah, is that sustainable? You've still got another... How many other legendary players are in Queensland at the moment?
He'd have to pick them off. He'd have to pick them off one by one.
Bring it up on your Google here. We can do this. We can go through the list.
Maybe what he needs to do is actually, instead of coaching against Queensland, he should actually coach them, because he seems to be much better at obliterating players when he's the coach himself. Welcome back to the Voluntary Tackle, and now we're discussing New Zealand's poor performance in the Rugby League World Cup, Chip. But there's now talk with New Zealand being relegated from the next World Cup, seeing as they did so poorly. Do you think that's a fair thing to happen to them after this performance?
I think maybe what you could do is put in a qualifying event for them, but maybe not against another team. Maybe they should have to swim from I don't know, Sydney to Hobart's a long way. I'm not saying they should have to swim from home to the game, and then when they show up, they look scary and they're hydrated and they're ready to play.
Well, they'd be fucking buggered though, wouldn't they, when they've swum the Tasman? Would they be game fit?
Well, I think it'd be an interesting haka afterwards. How would that go down? Because if you can't do an enthusiastic haka, if you can't do an enthusiastic haka, it doesn't really give you that edge.
Do you think they're losing? The reason they're losing is because they're going too hard on the haka.
Maybe
they've lost all their energy by the time they've finished the haka, and they've got nothing left for the game.
Yeah, they've done it all already.
Do you think New Zealand should, Chip, be made to do some community service since they've done so badly in the last World Cup? Maybe, the way drunk drivers have to go through those sort of rehabilitation workshops?
Yeah, it's a
Maybe
good idea.
New Zealand should have to do the same thing.
Yeah, I think so. What kind of thing could they do?
Well, maybe they could maybe go to one of those workshops where they have to learn the rules from the ground up again. Because I actually don't know if they know the rules.
Oh, maybe they could actually be coached by a team of, Year 7 students or something
that
for
would
a day.
Humiliate them.
Yeah.
They need to be humiliated. Well, they've already been humiliated, but further humiliation would, I think, increase their performance in 4 years' time.
What would you do? How would you straighten them out?
Well, the first thing I'd do would be sack David Kidwell.
You'd have to say suck David Kidwell if you were in New Zealand. So you've got to get the accent right, first of all. They're not going to understand you.
David Kidwell. That was
okay,
fun.
Don't go there. But
I'm going to do my normal voice.
Just suck David Kidwell.
But you know what? You've given me an idea, a bit of a thought bubble there, Chip, because maybe their community service should be trying to rebuild David Kidwell's coaching reputation. Welcome back to the Voluntary Tackle. Now, this is just a news story that's come across our periphery literally in the last couple of minutes, Chip, and there is a proposal for the next World Cup to have an entirely Indigenous team.
Wow.
Now, that surprises me a little bit because, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're an Indigenous, you're an Australian anyway, so why are we separating the two? Do you find it's a bit problematic?
It's interesting because could you be a non-Aboriginal person and play in that team? Like you could be a black person, for example, and play in the Australian team, or you could be, a Maori or an Islander with dark skin and play in, any of the teams if you happen to be, qualify for that. How would you qualify? Could we qualify?
No, well, I mean, it's an Indigenous team. We're whiteys. We're definitely not making it.
Interesting.
But, I mean, here's the question. Would Jonathan Thurston and Greg Inglis and those guys stop playing for Australia and start playing for the Indigenous team? I mean, that starts to get into weird territory.
It's a very interesting idea.
Well, it certainly gives me other ideas, Chip. I mean, where do you stop? I mean, if we start creating an Indigenous team for Australia, I mean, are we within our rights to start other weird, esoteric kind of teams? For example, in the next Rugby League World Cup, should we have a team comprised entirely of people who love George Michael?
Well, we've come down a strange pathway.
But I'm saying this, if we go down this whole identity politics route, Chip, I'm a bit concerned because where do we stop? At the end of the day, are we going to start entering teams? Are we going to have a team of midgets in the next Rugby League World Cup? That's my question.
Awesome.
Well, I would, if there was going to be a team of midgets, I'd be okay with it, as long as they only ever played a team of giants.
How do you scrum?
It's difficult. It's a logistical issue.
How do you scrum?
I mean, you'd probably have to put their head into the giant's ball sack.
Like, it would be difficult for a giant to score a 40-20 only. Like, to kick the ball out between The 40 and the 20 would be really like a small kick that would have to be really accurate.
For a giant, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you
You'd
mean.
be like, you'd kick it 3 fields away.
And how would the midget defend it? They'd have no chance.
Well, they'd get launched if they were anywhere near the ball.
They could get squashed.
How would the giant know if the midget was actually holding the ball when he picked it up to kick it?
He might not even see the midget.
Might not even see him.
At the end
Just
of the
see
day,
this big fucking ball, pick it up.
Let's
kick
be
it.
realists about it. They
Could
may
be a
not even
bunch of
see the
midgets
midget
living in
team.
that ball, for all they know.
100%.
Could have moved in.
Well, the midgets could have a colony inside the Steeden. And to finish off the show tonight, we're doing some predictions like we do we try to do every episode. And we're talking about the semi-finals in the Rugby League World Cup. Now, Chip, there are only 4 teams remaining. Surprisingly, Fiji is still in it. Tonga playing very well as well. How do you see the Australian-Fiji game going?
Do you want a score prediction?
Oh, you can certainly cut and dice this any way you like.
38-12. I'll go to Australia.
Okay, now if anyone gets that on Sportsbet, they're liable to give 12% of their winnings to Chip Jones and Aimon Brown.
Why did you get... I mean, how do we
I'm
split
present.
that?
I'm present.
You can have 2%. I get
fuck
10.
that.
I said
I'm
it.
here. I
said
gave the
it.
offer.
No.
I gave the illegal offer.
I gave the exact winning margin.
Sounds
That's
like
worth a lot
horse
more
shit.
than going, I'm just here also.
Okay, listener,
if it wins,
if you put it
can have
on,
2%.
just give it to me.
I
Fuck
get-
Chip.
Or let me tell you this. I think it'll be about 12-6 at halftime. I think it will be close for a little while.
Now, in the last game, Valentine Holmes scored 5, Chip. Do you think, considering it was against Samoa, that should not stand as a record as far as official records go? That's like me sort of just going for a jog.
Well, I've seen you go for a jog.
It's not good, is
It's
it?
not inspiring.
It's
in
not.
the
I have a
least.
poor technique.
I've seen you swim.
Oh, I've got a worse technique there.
Yeah.
I've almost got a
seen you
hybrid
swim.
butterfly backstroke.
I've actually seen you throw up.
Did I have a poor technique when I was chundering as well? I bet I
Well,
did.
you were loud, dude. The bouncer was in there quick.
Was he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember a
You-
thing,
Well,
obviously.
you wouldn't. No.
The other game, Chip, is Tonga versus England. Now, I think this will be a boil-over. I'm actually going to predict Tonga to win in a very tight match. How do you see it going?
I agree with you, and I think in nominating the margin for that game, I'm going to have to pass the baton over to you. I do see England losing the game. I'm getting a feeling of 8 points for them, or maybe 8 minutes of play, or something. There's an 8 there for me.
You're doing a bit of a John Edwards.
I'm trying to encourage you.
Who's
to
passing
see
over?
the light here. See the game.
If you're going to ask me, if you're going to push me, I think it's going to be 16-14, Tonga over England.
16-14.
It's going to be a very tight one.
That's a good. That's
Put
a
some
good
money on
margin.
it, listeners.
Okay. Responsibly, if you're a fuckwit. If you're a fuckwit, you may only gamble responsibly.
Well, that about brings us to the end of the show. The voluntary tackle for another week. How did you see it, Chip? Have you got any final thoughts for the listeners?
I think it's an interesting time in rugby league at the moment. I think 2018 is going to be a belter. Mitchell Pearce, player of the season, right? I think Brad Fittler will become New South Wales coach. I think they can win finally, and I haven't thought that in my heart for a while. I'm still not sure.
I haven't thought that since the 90s.
I don't really feel it in my heart yet.
Well, thanks for hanging in there, folks, and listening to another episode of The Voluntary Tackle. I'm Aimon Brown.
Chip Jones.
But before we go, just remember to subscribe to our Twitter feed. We are on there at voluntarytackle.com.au. It's probably not it. We're also on YouTube, and if you get a chance, you can check out The Fault Report, www.thefaultreport.com.au, where 9 out of 10 readers can't tell the difference. But until next time, try not to do a runny number 2.